The windshield wipers beat a rhythm against the glass that matched her exhaustion. 12 hours, 3 codes called, 1 lost. Elowen drove down the empty highway, believing the only danger at 5:47 a.m. was falling asleep at the wheel. She was wrong. The true threat wasn't back at the hospital. It was lying in the tall grass ahead, bleeding shadows onto the wet asphalt. Sunrise was 13 minutes away. 13 minutes before the most beautiful, lethal stranger she would ever meet burned to ash. She thought she was stopping to save a life. She didn't realize that by opening her car door, she was inviting a predator who hadn't fed in 3 days to take far more than just her help. The rain had turned the highway into a black mirror, reflecting nothing but the occasional flash of Elowen's headlights as they swept across the asphalt. Her windshield wipers beat a rhythm that matched her exhaustion. 12 hours at the hospital, 3 codes called, 1 lost. The metallic taste of adrenaline still clung to the back of her throat as she drove, her scrubs damp with sweat beneath her jacket. The clock on her dashboard read 5:47 a.m. Sunrise in 13 minutes. She almost didn't see him. The figure lay crumpled at the edge of the road, half hidden in the tall grass that bordered the shoulder. Elowen's foot hit the brake before her mind fully registered what her eyes had caught. A pale hand, fingers splayed against the wet pavement, utterly motionless. The car fish-tailed slightly as she pulled over, gravel crunching beneath her tires. Her hands trembled as she killed the engine. Every instinct screamed at her to drive on, to call 911 from a safe distance. But she'd taken an oath. She'd held dying hands and whispered comfort into fading ears, and she wouldn't leave someone bleeding out on a lonely stretch of highway. The rain soaked through her clothes the moment she stepped out. Cold needles against her skin, the smell of wet earth and something else. Something metallic and wrong. She fumbled for her phone, the flashlight beam cutting through the pre-dawn darkness as she approached. He was beautiful. The thought arrived unbidden, inappropriate but undeniable. Even sprawled in the mud, even with dark stains spreading across his white shirt, he possessed a symmetry that made her breath catch. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic lines, framed by black hair that clung to his temples. His skin held a pallor that went beyond shock, marble white, luminous even in the weak light. Elowen dropped to her knees beside him, her fingers finding his throat. His skin was ice. No pulse. She pressed harder, searching, and felt it, a flutter so faint it might have been her imagination, once every 5 seconds. Impossible. No one survived with a heart rate that slow. His eyes snapped open. Not brown, not blue, amber like backlit honey, and fixed on her face with an intensity that froze her in place. His lips parted, and she saw his chest heave with the effort of drawing breath. "Please," the word came out as a rasp, barely audible over the rain. His hand shot out and gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "The sun, I cannot. You must help me. I'm a nurse. Don't try to move. I'm calling." "No." The word cracked like a whip. His fingers tightened, and she felt the tremor running through him. No hospitals, no authorities. The sun rises in minutes. If you leave me here, I die. If you call them, I die. Please. Elowen's training warred with the primal warning bells clanging in her skull. His grip was wrong, too strong for someone who should be in shock. His eyes were wrong, pupils blown wide, catching the light like an animal's. Everything about this was wrong. But he was dying. She made her decision in the space between heartbeats. "My car, can you walk?" He tried to rise and collapsed back with a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. No. Elowen was strong. Years of lifting patience had built muscle beneath her slight frame, but he was deadweight as she hooked her arms under his shoulders. She dragged him across the gravel, his expensive shoes leaving tracks in the mud. He was tall, easily 6'2", and every inch of him radiated that unnatural cold. The sky was lightening, grey bleeding into the black at the horizon. She got him into the back seat, his long limbs folding awkwardly, his head lolling against the window. Blood smeared across the leather, too dark, almost black in the dim light. The smell of it filled the car, copper and something sweeter, like overripe fruit. She gasped, throwing herself into the driver's seat. "Where can I take you?" Away from the light. His voice was fading, each word an obvious effort. Anywhere dark, basement, underground. Elowen's mind raced through options. Her apartment was 4th floor, east-facing, flooded with morning sun. The hospital was impossible. Her parents lived 2 hours away. But there was, "I know a place." She gunned the engine and pulled back onto the highway, her speedometer climbing past 80. In the rearview mirror, she could see him sprawled across the back seat, one arm thrown over his eyes. His chest barely moved. The old church sat 3 miles off the main road, abandoned for a decade after the congregation had moved to a newer building in town. Elowen had explored it once as a teenager, drawn by the Gothic architecture and the rumors of ghosts. She remembered the stone steps leading down to the crypt, the cool darkness that never quite lifted. The sky was pink now. Streaks of gold painted the clouds. She took the turn too fast, her tires screaming, branches scraping against the car's sides as she navigated the overgrown driveway. The church loomed ahead, its steeple a dark silhouette against the brightening sky. She skidded to a stop by the side entrance, killed the engine, and twisted around. "We're here. Can you?" He was convulsing. Thin wisps of smoke rose from his exposed skin where the first rays of sunlight had found him through the window. The smell of burning flesh filled the car, acrid and nauseating. His back arched, and the sound that tore from his throat was inhuman, a keening wail that raised every hair on Elowen's body. She lunged into the back seat, throwing her body over his, blocking the light with her own shadow. Her hands found the emergency blanket she kept in the back, the metallic fabric crinkling as she wrapped it around him, covering every inch of exposed skin. "Hold on. Just hold on." She dragged him from the car, and this time he helped, his movements jerky and desperate. The church door was locked, but the wood was rotted. Elowen threw her shoulder against it once, twice, and it gave way with a crack that echoed through the empty sanctuary. The darkness inside was absolute. She pulled him across the threshold and kicked the door shut behind them, cutting off the golden light that was flooding the world outside. They collapsed together on the stone floor, both gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs. Silence, darkness, the smell of dust and decay. Slowly, Elowen unwrapped the blanket from his face. In the shadows, his eyes found hers, and she saw them clearly now, amber irises surrounding pupils that had contracted to vertical slits. His lips pulled back, and there, unmistakable in the dim light filtering through the stained glass windows, were fangs, long, curved, sharp enough to tear. He smiled, and it was terrible and beautiful all at once. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving my life." The stone floor pressed cold and unforgiving against Elowen's knees. Her breath came in ragged gasps that echoed off the vaulted ceiling, each inhale drawing in air thick with centuries of accumulated dust and the faint, sweet rot of forgotten prayers. The metallic blanket lay crumpled between them, catching what little light filtered through the stained glass windows. fragments of crimson and azure that painted Thaddeus's face in shifting shadows. His smile faded slowly, like a candle guttering out. The fangs remained visible, pressing against his lower lip as he studied her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She could see the burns now, angry red welts that traced the line of his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar. The flesh was already knitting itself back together, but the process looked painful, the skin rippling like disturbed water. "You're hurt," she said, the nurse in her automatically cataloguing injuries, even as her mind struggled to reconcile what she'd just seen with any rational explanation. "It will heal." His voice was rough, scraped raw from that inhuman scream. He pushed himself up to sitting, movements careful, controlled. "Given time." "How much time?" A pause. His eyes, those impossible amber eyes with their vertical pupils, tracked across her face. The church settled around them with a groan of old wood and older stone. Elowen's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, feeling the denim rough beneath her palms, grounding herself in something real and solid. The adrenaline was beginning to ebb, leaving behind a strange hollow feeling in her chest. "On what?" she asked. "On whether you're going to run." He said it quietly, without inflection, but she heard the weight beneath the words. Most people run. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to bolt for the door, to put as much distance as possible between herself and this man, this thing with fangs and eyes that shouldn't exist. But her legs wouldn't move. She stayed kneeling on the cold stone, watching the way the colored light played across his features, and realized with a strange detachment that she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid for him. "Those men," she said. "They'll come looking." "Yes." He shifted, and she saw him wince as the movement pulled at the burns. "Cyprien doesn't leave loose ends." "Cyprien, the one who wants me dead." A bitter smile, among other things. Elowen's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments. The car chase, the dawn, the way he'd recoiled from sunlight like it was acid. "You're a vampire." The word hung in the dusty air between them. She'd expected it to sound ridiculous, like something from a late-night movie or a Halloween costume. Instead, it settled into the space with a terrible rightness, clicking into place like the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. Yes. No elaboration, no explanation. Just that single word, delivered with the weight of confession. She should have more questions, should demand answers, proof, something to make sense of the impossible. But her mind snagged on something else entirely. "You said thank you." His expression shifted, something almost like surprise flickering across his features. "I did. For saving your life." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the summer heat that was beginning to seep through the church walls as the sun climbed higher. "Do vampires usually thank people?" "No." He moved closer, just a fraction, testing. When she didn't pull away, he reached out and touched her hand where it rested on her knee. His fingers were cool but not cold, and she could feel the faint tremor running through them. "We usually take what we need and disappear. We don't form attachments. We don't—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "We don't let humans risk themselves for us." "Then why did you let me?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand, an absent gesture that sent warmth spreading up her arm. "I don't know," he said finally. "I should have compelled you to forget me the moment you picked me up. Should have sent you home and dealt with Cyprien's hunters on my own. Compelled. A gift of my kind. A way to make humans see what we want them to see. Do what we want them to do." His eyes met hers, and there was something raw in them, something that looked almost like shame. I tried, in the car. When you first offered to help, Elowen's breath caught. She remembered that moment, the way his gaze had locked onto hers, the strange pulling sensation behind her sternum. It didn't work. No. His hand tightened on hers. It didn't, and I don't know why. The church groaned again, and somewhere in the rafters a bird took flight, wings beating against the stale air. Elowen looked down at their joined hands, his pale fingers threaded through her darker ones, and felt something shift in her chest. Not fear. Not anymore. Something else. Something that felt dangerously like recognition. The burns, she said, forcing herself back to practical matters. They're healing, but slowly. You need... She stopped, the realization hitting her with physical force. You need blood. His hand went very still on hers. Yes. How long has it been since you fed? A muscle jumped in his jaw. 3 days. Cyprien made sure of that. Weakened me before he set his trap. 3 days. Elowen's medical training kicked in automatically, calculating blood volume and metabolic needs, even as her mind reeled at the impossibility of applying human physiology to whatever Thaddeus was. You won't heal properly without it. The burns will take too long, and if those men find us, they will find us. He said it with certainty. No room for hope. It's only a matter of time. This church won't hide us forever. The light through the stained glass had shifted, painting the floor in pools of ruby and sapphire. Elowen stared at those colors, at the way they bled into each other at the edges, and made a decision that felt both insane and inevitable. Then take mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the bird in the rafters went quiet. No, Thaddeus pulled his hand back, and the loss of contact felt like a physical blow. Elowen, no. You need blood to heal. I'm offering. You don't understand what you're offering. He stood abruptly, moving away from her with a speed that made her head spin. One moment he was beside her, the next he was across the sanctuary, pressed against the far wall like he was trying to put as much distance between them as possible. Feeding it's not like a blood transfusion. It's intimate. I know what it is. She rose to her feet, legs unsteady beneath her. The stone floor was gritty under her shoes as she crossed toward him. I've read the stories, seen the movies. Stories. He laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. Movies. You think you know, but you don't. When I feed, I'll feel everything you feel. Your fear, your desire, your... He stopped, jaw clenching. And you'll feel me, what I am, what I've done. 450 years of death and darkness, all of it pouring into you through that connection. 450 years, the number should have been impossible to process, but Elowen found herself accepting it with the same strange calm that had settled over her since they'd crashed through the church door. Will it hurt? No. The word came out rough. It will feel. He turned away, shoulders rigid beneath his torn shirt. It will feel good. Too good. That's the danger. That's why you should run while you still can. But she didn't run. She closed the distance between them until she was close enough to feel the unnatural coolness radiating from his skin, close enough to see the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Thaddeus. He flinched at the sound of his name. Don't. Look at me. Slowly, as if it cost him something, he turned. The colored light fell across his face, and she saw the hunger there, raw and desperate beneath the iron control. His pupils had dilated until only a thin ring of amber remained, and she could see the fangs pressing against his lower lip. Longer now. Sharper. I'm choosing this, she said quietly. Not because you compelled me, not because I don't understand, but because you saved me first, back in that car. You could have run, could have left me to face those men alone, but you didn't. That's different. How? He opened his mouth, closed it. She watched him struggle for words, this ancient creature who'd lived longer than her great-grandparents, and saw something in his expression that looked achingly human. Because, he said finally, I can't remember the last time someone looked at me the way you're looking at me right now. And how am I looking at you? Like I'm worth saving. The words hung between them, fragile and profound. Elowen reached up and touched his face, feeling the coolness of his skin, the faint tremor that ran through him at the contact. The burns were still visible, angry red marks that would take hours to heal without help. Hours they didn't have. You are worth saving, she said. So let me. For a long moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, his hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. If we do this, he said, voice low, there's no going back. The bond, it doesn't break easily. You'll carry a piece of me with you. Always. Then I'll carry it. Something in his expression cracked. The control he'd been maintaining so carefully slipped, and she saw the want beneath it, fierce and consuming. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair, and he pulled her closer with a gentleness that belied the hunger in his eyes. Tell me to stop, he whispered against her temple. Tell me you've changed your mind. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her head, exposing the line of her throat, and felt his breath ghost across her skin. Cool, steady, nothing like the racing of her own pulse. I trust you, she said, and meant it. The first touch of his lips against her neck was feather-light, almost reverent. He traced the line of her jugular with his mouth, and she felt the scrape of fangs, sharp enough to draw blood with the slightest pressure. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but it wasn't fear that made her pulse race. It was anticipation. Elowen. Her name was a prayer and a warning. Last chance. Stop talking, she said, and bite me. He did. The pain was brief, a bright spark that flared and vanished almost instantly. Then came the pleasure, rolling through her in waves that made her knees buckle. He caught her, one arm banding around her waist, holding her upright as he drank. She could feel it, the pull of her blood leaving her body, but it didn't feel like loss. It felt like connection, like a circuit completing, electricity arcing between them with every swallow. And then she felt him. Not just his physical presence solid and cool against her, but his mind, his essence, bleeding into hers through that point of contact. 450 years of memory crashed over her in fragments, a castle on a cliff, its stones dark with rain, a woman's face beautiful and cruel, smiling as she turned away, the weight of a crown heavy with responsibility and blood, the endless aching loneliness of immortality. And beneath it all, threading through every memory like a golden thread, was desire for her, for this moment, for the impossible connection forming between them with every heartbeat. She gasped, fingers digging into his shoulders, and felt him respond, the arm around her waist tightening as he pulled her flush against him. The world narrowed to the point where they touched, where her blood flowed into him and his darkness flowed into her, and she understood with sudden clarity what he'd meant about intimacy. This wasn't just feeding, this was merging. This was knowing someone in a way that went beyond words, beyond thought, straight to the core of what they were. When he finally pulled back, she made a sound of protest, and he gentled it with a kiss against the puncture marks, his tongue sealing the wounds with something that made her skin tingle. She swayed, dizzy, and he caught her, lowering them both to the floor with a care that made her chest ache. Elowen. His voice was different now, stronger, and when she forced her eyes open, she saw that the burns were gone. His skin was smooth and unmarked, the color returning to his face. "Are you all right?" Was she? She felt light-headed, wrung out, but also strangely energized, like she'd touched a live wire and survived. "I'm fine," she managed. "You? Better than fine." He cupped her face in both hands, and she saw wonder in his expression, raw and unguarded. "I can feel you, inside me. Your warmth, your strength. How is that possible?" "You tell me. You're the 450-year-old vampire." A laugh, surprised and genuine. "I've fed from thousands, but I've never felt this. Never felt." He stopped, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "You're extraordinary." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then from outside came the sound of an engine. Close. Too close. Thaddeus's head snapped up, every muscle in his body going taut. "They're here." Elowen's blood went cold. "How many?" "4. Maybe 5. He was on his feet in an instant, pulling her up with him. Cyprien's grey guard. "Elite hunters. They won't stop until we're both dead. Then we run." "Where?" He gestured at the church around them. "We're surrounded by daylight. I'm stronger now thanks to you, but I can't survive prolonged exposure. And they know it." The engine cut off. Doors opened and closed with soft clicks that somehow sounded more ominous than slums would have. Footsteps crunched on gravel, moving with military precision around the perimeter of the church. Elowen's mind raced, cataloguing exits, weapons, anything that might give them an advantage. But the church was old and small, with only one door and windows too high and narrow to climb through. They were trapped. Thaddeus moved to the door, pressing his ear against the rotted wood. His expression was grim. "They're setting up a perimeter, waiting for orders." Orders from who? As if in answer, a voice rang out from the other side of the door, smooth, cultured, laced with amusement that made Elowen's skin crawl. "Thaddeus, old friend. I know you're in there." Thaddeus went very still. "Cyprien, come out and I promise to make it quick. For both of you." A pause. "Well, quick for you at least. The girl, I think I'll take my time with her. After all, she's already tasted you. It would be a shame to waste such exquisite blood." Elowen felt Thaddeus's rage before she saw it, a dark wave that crashed through the bond between them. His hands clenched at his sides, and when he turned to look at her, his eyes were blazing. "He's not touching you," he said, voice deadly quiet. "I don't care what it costs. He's not touching you." The footsteps outside moved closer. Cyprien's voice drifted through the door, intimate as a lover's whisper. "I'm waiting, old friend, and my patience has limits." The silence inside the church stretched taut as a wire. Elowen's pulse hammered against her throat, each beat a countdown. Through the warped wood of the door, she could hear Cyprien's breathing, slow, measured, savoring the moment like fine wine. Thaddeus turned to her, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before. Not fear, resignation. "There's a way out of this," he said quietly. "For you." "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't you dare suggest. Listen to me." He crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. His fingers trembled. "I can hold them off long enough for you to run. There's a crypt beneath the altar. It leads to the old cemetery. You can make it to the road before dawn." Outside, Cyprien laughed, the sound drifting through cracks in the wood like smoke. "I can hear you plotting in there, Thaddeus. How touching. But we both know how this ends." Elowen looked up at Thaddeus, at the sharp lines of his face carved by centuries of survival, at the mouth that had kissed her with such desperate tenderness. Her hands found his chest, feeling the stillness where a heartbeat should be. "No," she whispered. "There's another way." His jaw tightened. "Elowen, you told me once that you were a king." Her voice steadied, drawing strength from some deep well she hadn't known existed. "Show me." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, hope, fear. "What you're suggesting?" He shook his head. "The price is too high. I won't make you." "You're not making me do anything." She reached for the small knife tucked in her boot, the one Silas had given her before they'd fled the safe house. The blade caught the moonlight streaming through the broken windows. "I'm offering." Thaddeus went very still. Outside she heard the scrape of metal, weapons being drawn, positions being taken. Cyprien's voice rose again, closer now, right against the door. "I'm going to count to 10, old friend. Then I'm coming in, and when I do, I'll paint these walls with her before I end you." 1. Elowen pressed the blade to her palm. The edge was sharp enough that she barely felt the initial bite. 2. Elowen, "Don't." Thaddeus's hand shot out, but she stepped back. 3. "You said you were a king," she repeated, holding his gaze. "So be one. Take what I'm giving you." 4. Blood welled in her palm, dark and rich in the silver light. The scent of it filled the small space, and she watched Thaddeus's pupils dilate, his nostrils flare. 5. "I can't." His voice was raw. "If I take too much, you won't." She moved closer, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his skin. "Because I trust you. Because this is the only way we both survive." 6. Outside she heard wood splintering. They were breaking down the door. 7. Elowen pressed her bleeding palm to Thaddeus's lips. For a heartbeat he resisted, his whole body rigid with control. Then his hands came up to cradle hers, and his mouth opened against her skin. The first pull of his lips sent lightning through her veins. Not pain, something else entirely. Power flowing out of her and into him, a circuit completing. She felt his tongue against her palm, felt the gentle scrape of fangs, and then the world tilted. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward. Her knees buckled, but Thaddeus caught her, one arm banding around her waist as he drank. She could feel him changing, the coldness of his skin warming, his grip strengthening. Through the haze, she saw shadows gathering in the corners of the church, drawn to him like iron filings to a magnet. 10. The door exploded inward. Cyprien stood framed in the doorway, flanked by 6 grey guard, their silver weapons gleaming. His smile was triumphant, predatory, until he saw Thaddeus. Thaddeus lifted his head from Elowen's palm, and she felt the change in him like a physical force. His eyes had gone completely black, no white remaining, and when he smiled, his fangs were longer, sharper than she'd ever seen them. "Hello, Cyprien." His voice resonated with harmonics that made the air vibrate. "It's been a long time since I wore my crown." The temperature in the church plummeted. Frost spread across the stone floor in crystalline patterns, and the shadows in the corners began to move, to writhe, taking on shapes that hurt to look at directly. One of the grey guard took a step back, then another. Cyprien's face had gone pale. "That's impossible. You swore you'd never feed from a willing vessel." Thaddeus's smile widened. "I lied." He released Elowen gently, making sure she could stand, then turned to face the intruders. The shadows followed him, coiling around his shoulders like living smoke. "Kneel," he said softly. It wasn't a request. The word carried weight, authority that pressed down like a physical thing. Elowen felt it even through their bond, the sheer force of will, the power of a king who had ruled for centuries before choosing exile. The grey guard dropped as if their strings had been cut, weapons clattering to the stone. They fought it. She could see the strain in their faces, the cords standing out in their necks, but their bodies wouldn't obey them. Only Cyprien remained standing, though his legs shook with the effort. "You can't," he gasped. "The sun, it's almost dawn, even with her blood. You can't what?" Thaddeus moved forward, each step measured, deliberate. "Can't reclaim what was always mine. Can't punish those who thought my mercy was weakness." The shadows surged forward, wrapping around the grey guard like serpents. Their screams were brief, cut off as the darkness consumed them. Elowen watched, transfixed and horrified, as 6 warriors simply ceased to exist, their bodies dissolving into ash that scattered across the frost-covered floor. Cyprien fell to his knees. "Please," he whispered. "Thaddeus, please. You threatened her." Thaddeus's voice was empty of emotion now, cold as the grave. "You threatened to take your time with her, to waste her exquisite blood." He crouched in front of Cyprien, and Elowen saw the usurper's face contort with terror. "I want you to understand something," Thaddeus continued quietly. "She is mine, not as a possession, not as prey. She is my queen, my equal, and under my protection. And you," he reached out, almost gently, and touched Cyprien's forehead with one finger. "You are nothing." Cyprien's scream echoed through the church as his body began to age, centuries of stolen time catching up in seconds. His skin withered, his hair whitened and fell out in clumps, his eyes sinking into their sockets. In moments, there was nothing left but a desiccated husk that crumbled to dust. The shadows receded. The frost melted. Thaddeus stood slowly, his shoulders sagging as the power drained out of him. Elowen moved to his side, wrapping her uninjured hand around his. He looked down at her, and his eyes were their normal silver again, filled with exhaustion and something that might have been shame. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said hoarsely. She squeezed his hand. "I'm not." Through the broken doorway, the sky was beginning to lighten, purple fading to grey. Thaddeus glanced at it, then at her. "We need to go. The crypt will be dark enough," she finished. "Come on." They descended into the earth together, her blood still warm on his lips, his hand steady in hers. Behind them, the first rays of dawn touched the abandoned church, illuminating the ash scattered across ancient stone. In the darkness beneath, Elowen leaned against Thaddeus's chest, feeling the new warmth there, her warmth, her life, shared and transformed into something neither quite human nor vampire, but wholly theirs. "What happens now?" she whispered. His arms tightened around her. Now we disappear. Let the others think their king is dead. Let them build their new order." He pressed his lips to her hair, "And we build ours." Above them, the world turned toward morning. Below, in the quiet dark, 2 hearts beat as one living, one borrowed, both belonging to each other completely.